Welcome to Rough Drafts, How God Writes His Love in Our Stories, a podcast that explores the faith journeys of our friends and neighbors in Burns, Tennessee. Everyone has a story to tell, and in this podcast, we'll hear powerful and inspiring stories of how God works in the ordinary lives of people like you and me. Our stories are unfinished and perfectly imperfect. They are just rough drafts, a glimpse of what is to come because God is still at work, writing plot twists, introducing new characters, and bringing good even from the most challenging circumstances. Join us as we see what God is up to in our stories. Here's your host, Matthew Hyatt.
Today's guest will be familiar to you. You have heard her on our Three Musketeers episode, and it's not Margaret. And I said her, so you're probably thinking Paul, but it's not Paul. Today you have my motorcycle riding, help center directing, lemonade and hot dog making, formerly, friend, Renee Boehm.
Hey, welcome. Yes, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Are you really?
Well, no, I'm actually a little bit nervous, so just get that out in the open.
You know, what I love is every single person who's on this says they're nervous because it is really weird to sit in a room with me. That's just weird in and of itself, but it's weird.
I'm glad we got the windows.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe you'll get a rescue call here in a few minutes. But to record yourself talk is weird. But to tell your story is also something that we tend not to do, except for those who are closest to us. So,
well, yeah, I tell people all the time I'm an open book, and sometimes I say more than I should, or sometimes I'll forget something that I need to say. I get a little distracted too. So, squirrel, rabbit, birds out the window.
Hey, it is what it is. You do what you got to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, I know there's a million stories that we could talk about, and I'm going to say go. What's your God story? How'd you end up who you are, where you are? What has God done in your life that you want to tell us about?
Well, God has done a lot, and I'll start back.
He does that,
Yes, he does. I'll start back into 1944.
Wait a minute. 1944. You're looking good for your age.
Well, thank you very much. So back in 1944, a beautiful woman gave birth to my dad. And so I'm always going to be forever grateful for her and for my grandfather. One of the things that those that are closest to me know that when my grandmother was given birth nearly 80 years ago, she had a very difficult childbirth. And so my uncle was already born, and they actually had thought that he was deceased, and they had put him in another room, and she had to then choose her life or my dad's life. And I know that's not something that we have to worry about as much now, but she did. She chose to give my daddy life and took her last breath. And so one of my goals later in life was that, I want to honor the choice that she made by being the very best version of myself that I can be for her memory, for the Lord, and for my family.
Wow. Okay, so this starts intense. We are 2 minutes and 54 seconds in, and we've had our first death. Okay.
Yes, and and I was actually named after her, but I did not value that because my brothers were so mean to me because I am the youngest of three, and so my first name is Frances, so my brothers often called me Frances the Talking Mule. So, I did not value that name until I got older, but I do go by Renee.
Okay.
But, when people ask, I will let them know. And so.
Well, that's cool, though. Like, talk about a story that gives shape to your life, knowing that you wouldn't be here had your grandmother not chosen to prioritize someone over herself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, and the blessing behind that is that my uncle actually lived too. He pulled through. And so, he and my dad are still living today, and they are identical twins. My uncle lives in Ohio, and my dad lives 10 feet from me. Okay. And so they'll be 80 this year. And so they were actually born one of about 15 groups of twins in the Whites Creek area in about a 5 to 10 year span. So, there was a big, it was a really cool deal back then. And would it be now too. But anyway, so they are the Wallace twins of Whites Creek.
The Wallace twins of Whites Creek. That sounds like a bluegrass band.
Yes.
Or maybe like an old crime syndicate. I'm not sure which.
Yes. And so, so anyway, that's kind of how we started. And my mom and dad met. My dad was a soldier and met her from Germany. And when he was over serving in Germany. And I tell people all the time, I've got a neat side of the story. In World War II, both of my grandparents, my grandfathers, one served under the American Army and one served for Hitler.
Oh.
And so
Maybe reunions were exciting.
Well, my grandfather was a prisoner of war. And so he was captured by the Americans. And the Americans were so good to him that my grandfather absolutely loved America. And so to hear his story was always really powerful. And we have his, his military uniform from back then, and where he etched everything off because he did not want to be associated with Hitler. And so, his story is really, really cool. And so,
Man.
I know, right? So that's a little bit of my history. So my mom and dad moved back here to America, and they started their life here with my brother. He was born in Germany, and so my parents had a very rough start to their life here in America because my mom was German. And back then, people often criticized the women from other countries that they were marrying Americans just to get over here to America.
Well, no one would say that anymore at all.
Right. And so people were really mean to her. Yeah. And so she had to learn to be tough. And so my dad would work 2-3 jobs to keep my mom home. And I've had amazing parents. I have amazing parents. We joke, but they literally live 10 feet from me. Yeah. We all live on the same property. And, they did the very best they could with the resources that they had, and some people will say, well, y'all grew up in poverty. Some people say you grew up poor. Well, we grew up living within our means, and, it did land us living in a trailer park. And so I grew up in a close-knit trailer park in East Nashville. And we were living where we were the minorities for much of my upbringing. And so, school was a little difficult at times, but, my parents, they loved everyone. I never got subjected to, there being any kind of race division. And, that my parents were just really, really good at that. And, but we didn't know the Lord.
Yeah.
And I know you and I've kind of talked a little bit about this, and so I'm just going to throw that out there. Yeah. My early experience with church people was really bad. Like I said, my mom...
Tell the story. Be frank with it.
My mom and dad were mistreated, my mom especially, because all of my dad's family on his mother's side were a devout Church of Christ. And nothing that my mom could do was right. And so, they were constantly...
Because she was from a different church.
She was from a different upbringing. She didn't dress right. She didn't talk right. And they thought she was using my dad. They thought that she was not a good mom. And, in Germany, they believed a lot differently, and so she might have been considered rough around the edges. So they'd beat her up with the Bible quite a bit and just be very judgmental and hard. And so my dad was raised Church of Christ, and so he just stepped away from it. And so what that did is that put a very negative look on religion for us growing up. And so my mom did not like church. She did not like religious people, didn't want to have anything to do with any of that. And so I can remember being growing up in the trailer park, and all these churches would come because, all the churches want to evangelize the poor. Mm-hmm. Not that the middle class or upper class need Jesus, but the poor need Jesus more. And
Well, yeah, the poor are easier to evangelize. That's why the churches do it.
right.
I'm not trying to. I mean, there is a, Jesus says take care of the poor, so that's a thing. Mm-hmm. But if you're thinking a little more cynically about why churches send buses to the poor neighborhoods, it's because if they send the buses to the middle class and the rich neighborhoods, those kids are off playing sports or video games. The kids in the poor neighborhoods will get on the bus. It's easier to do, so churches do what's easy.
You know what? I agree with that. Mike and I, we ride motorcycles.
Yeah, you do.
Well, we used to really. We're not there in that season right now, but I always couldn't figure it out. I was like, why are all these groups targeting the Harley riders? Why is there not some kind of evangelism going for, the Hondas or, the BMWs? But
guys on Gold Wings don't need Jesus. It's the Hells Angels on Harleys.
Right. And so that was funny, too, because that kind of went along with the way that I was brought up. It's like, But, so, I remember being a child growing up. My mom and dad, didn't want to have anything to do with the church, and they were really vocal about it. And so as a child growing up in a trailer park, the church people, whatever denomination it was, because there were multiple denominations that would come to our trailer park, and they'd walk around, knock on the doors and invite us, and then they would come pick us up, and they would bribe us to go to church. And so we would get on their little bus or their big bus. One of the churches had a great big city bus. And I remember when they came in and they run into one of the people's cars, and getting that fixed was an ordeal. But I remember all those little things, right? Because it just went right along with what my mom and dad would say about church people. And so, really that hypocritical, judgmental. And so I remember we went to one church for about a year, and I guess we wasn't meeting what their expectations were. And so they just stopped coming to get us. I remember all of us, about 15, 20 kids waiting for the church bus to come, and it never came back. And, so when I reflected back on that, it's like, were we not meeting their expectations? What was the reasoning behind that? I don't know, but in a child's mind, and
for all it could have been, the bus broke down, or the one guy who had a license got sick.
It could have been, but no one communicated with us, and and then that was the last time we saw anybody from that church, and and then churches would come, and we're going to have ice cream parties, and so they would. So then we looked at it, like, the church is bribing us. Let's go.
Yeah.
I mean, we're thugs and heathens anyway. Let's go, and our parents were fine with that because it's like, hey, y'all are out of the house for a few hours.
They're here for a while, got you some free drinks.
Right. Yep. And so, but anyway, so
what's funny, and I know you've got a whole lot more story to tell, so I know we can't camp out here forever, but the delicate dance of how you do things to serve people, it's so hard. It's so easy to do it poorly, to turn acts of love into acts of bribery. Mm-hmm. And people can tell when you're only giving me something because you think you're going to fix me, change me, or recruit me. It's a really hard thing for a church to do. I'm going to do this good thing because it's the right thing to do and because we love you, not because we're trying to get you. And the truth is, if you're a Christ follower who's an evangelical, you believe in trying to get people. That's part of it. One of the reasons we do good deeds is to try to help people know God. But if it's, I'm just doing this to try to get you to my church, man, I'm not saying this real well, but it's sticky for us.
It does, and it sticks literally with people. And so, I grew up with that, and I remember, I don't know if I should share this, but I'm going to go ahead and share it. That's what your
good stories start.
You're saying to share it, so I will. So I remember being probably about 12, 13 years old. I might have been a little bit older. And by that time, I never wanted to have anything to do with a church because, when you would start getting close to people, then they'd stop coming and, that kind of thing. So I'd already been hurt and heard all the other stuff. And and I got to experience how my dad's side of the family were treating us and my mom, and because even though they would love us, we I never felt truly comfortable going to their homes because, I always felt like we were second-class citizens. And that's not anything that my mom and dad ever wanted us to feel like, because, like I said, my mom and dad, I couldn't have asked for better parents. And so anyway, I remember one day the church bus years later one of the church buses started coming back down. And by that time I was already in my thug stage.
Yeah.
And as they were leaving, I was like, you know what? And I mooned them. And I'm like, there you go. And
you sure told them.
I sure told them. And of course, all the little people on there was like, it's like me and my little self at that point was really, really funny. But anyway, because that's just the way that I viewed them. Yeah. And so, school was rough, life was rough, and,
East Nashville in that era, it's super weird to me that East Nashville is trendy and expensive now, because like East Nashville for me growing up was don't go there after dark.
Right. Yes, I know. I was listening that you grew up in that area, and I've always forgot to ask you what area.
Well, I was in West Nashville.
Oh,
we
you were one of them.
Touch East Nashville,
okay. So, yes. Because we were, we were rough, but we were a product of our surrounding. And, I grew up at the end of a dead end road, and, it was a trailer park. It was pretty secluded. But, man, Dickerson Road was rough. And so we had our ladies of the night named, and, one of them, I had her name Lula Bell. We was joking about that earlier, but, we didn't know their names, but we would anyway, because I remember at the top of our road from where I lived, there was a strip club. And I don't know where you would go to have sex, pay to have sex with the ladies. And we would sit literally out on my friend's porch and watch the ladies of the night come in and out of this downstairs basement building. And that's just what they did. Men came and go, and the women. And, that was just part of what we saw.
My mom gave me some advice about that growing up when we drove on Dickerson one time. And she said, you know how you can tell if it's a prostitute or a cop? She said, if they have teeth, it's a cop. And at the time it was a joke, but it's not, because the women who end up in that lifestyle
yes.
are so abused, so harmed, so broken. There's just kind of this myth that this is something where they make money. This is a life of last resort.
It is. And, and my heart later in life just began to break for women, especially women in that industry, because, when they were born, somebody didn't look at them and say, oh, you know what, when you grow up, I want you to be in this lifestyle. No. And I'm sure that little girl had lots of dreams until she became broken. Absolutely. And, and that's what I look back on my life is, I have a lot of brokenness in my life. And, my parents did the very best they could do. And, I still, I still experienced a lot. I saw a lot. And, I took my husband and my daughter the other day. We drove down through that area. And, as I was driving down Dickerson Road, I looked at Nevaeh and I said, the first time I ever saw somebody shot and killed was right there. And I'll never forget that young man when he was shot and just literally his body falling down that car. I'll never forget that. And I said, and I started remembering. I'm like, oh, I remember up here that night I snuck out to go meet my boyfriend a few trailer parks over, that we came up on a John or kind of, that pimp deal with his ladies, and how we got chased through the woods in the middle of the night because we interrupted stuff we weren't supposed to, and some of the dangers that we experienced, and, that my parents didn't know because, I was sneaking out and to go do things I shouldn't be doing. And so, and then when we pulled down into the park, all these things started flowing back through my mind. And, as sheltered and as protected as my mom and dad tried to keep us, still being kids, we still found ways to do things that they didn't know about. And my mom will tell you, just stop talking. I don't want to hear about any more of this, because it literally, and now as a parent, it's like, oh my gosh, it would just kill me to, or break my heart to have my children sit down and start talking about things like what me and my brothers did. And so
Mom, don't listen for a little bit. Okay.
And so she's, bless her heart, my mom and dad have had to listen to my testimony more than they want. And so they, I'm sure, but they're proud of me and they love me and they support me. And so, so here I am, I'm doing things I shouldn't be doing. And, and I'll just throw this out there real quick. My parents didn't know, but I was experiencing sexual abuse for a period of about 3 or 4 years by people that my parents trusted, and in that time people didn't talk about it, and so I was constantly being threatened. This is going to happen, that's going to happen. If you say something, nobody's going to believe, and so I started internalizing that pretty bad. And so by the time I was about 13, 14, I was pretty sexually active, and just, because I felt like that was the way that you kept people's interest, or guys' interest. And so, and then in my rebellion at 16, I became pregnant. I was about 15, 16 with my first pregnancy, and I lost that pregnancy. And then I got pregnant again at 16, and I was in high school, and, this trauma starts coming back, this unchecked trauma, and my life choices. I tell people all the time, because everybody wants to go back and blame their parents. You know what? There comes a point in your life where you're old enough to make your decisions. Stop blaming your parents. I mean, the difference between right and wrong. So I would never say, well, this is my parents' fault. No, I made these decisions, and I want to make that clear, because my parents were amazing. They are amazing, but I made choices.
Yeah, I think a real part of growing up to be emotionally healthy is recognizing, one, the influence that our parents and our environment had on us, because it does affect who we are and what we become. Mm-hmm. But then moving from that to two, I have choices I have to make on the basis of that.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree. I agree with that.
And it's tough because, if you didn't have parents who showed you right and wrong, your ability to make choices, your hands are tied behind your back. I'm not going to try to pretend like that's not true, Right. Part of why you and I are where we are is because for the things our moms and dads did right and wrong, they gave us a sense of they might not have given you a great sexual ethic at 15, mm-hmm. but they did give you a sense of justice.
Yes.
Of there were, people sometimes think when you go into the jail that it's like it is the most orderly place in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. There is a code. There's a reason I can't have a sex offender in my Bible class with people who aren't, because there's a code. There's a reason why somebody who used to be a police officer can't be in the same class as somebody,
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's again a sticky thing. And one of the things, I know I'm jumping way ahead, so don't let me go too far here. One of the things that I appreciate a whole lot about you and your stories and what you're sharing and what you do at the Help Center, you live in a space where you have to navigate a whole lot of these tensions simultaneously. Mm-hmm. And my experience is that most of us tend to not do subtlety well. We tend to drive the joy bus into the neighborhood and say, here's your ice cream and Jesus, or we tend to do nothing. When I think there's an answer somewhere between the two that's a really good answer,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I try to be that person, right? I want to, I try to evaluate everything. And so I got pregnant with my son, Brent, who I just, hold on a minute.
That's okay.
His dad and I, we realized that we were young, and so I was in school, and I became a topic because I'm 51, I'm 52, and so back then it wasn't like it became later on, and so I remember going to school and telling my teacher, who I adored, that I was pregnant, and she looked at me and said, you've just thrown your whole life away.
Oh.
And she just stopped communicating with me. And it broke my heart because she was that one positive teacher influence that I had. And then when I went to the only man that I knew as a grandfather, he told me, he said, there are two worthless things in this world, and a white picket fence and a pregnant teenager. And that was very difficult for me. And, I know that I broke my mom and dad's heart. And, obviously, family on other sides, right? Because I had been criticized, for getting pregnant so early. And so, but anyway, we mustered through that, and my parents became extremely supportive of me and their dad, and just trying to help us navigate through this. And so by the 17, when I had him, that's why when people tell me, oh, my grandparents are totally against me being pregnant for whatever reason, it's like, wait till that baby's born.
Yeah.
Wait till that baby is born. Because as hurtful as my grandfather's words were to me, and obviously they played an impact in my story because I still remember them, right? But when he saw Brent, nothing else in this world mattered. And until the day he died, he loved Brent with his whole heart and his whole everything he had. And so, and he became one of my biggest supporters in my few years that we were struggling. And so then, by the time I was 18, I was pregnant again with my daughter. And at that point, the conversation of abortion had come about, and we were really contemplating abortion because Brent was not, there's 18 months between the two of them. Yeah. And so, we were already struggling. We were already having a difficult time, and we were living in a house with no electricity, no water, and trying, and there was a lot of difficulties going on. And so the conversation of abortion came up, and so we were looking at that route, and I had a lady come to me that had had abortion before, and she had said, Renee, you guys really need to think about this. And she sat me down and gave me the most graphic definition of an abortion.
Yeah.
And there was just absolutely no way that I could go through with it.
Right.
And Bobby was supportive of me, and I remember going and telling our family, hey, guess what? Now we've got baby number 2.
Yeah.
Coming. And so, and I'm so thankful for that, that conversation with that woman, because that graphic conversation that she had with me. And so I had to drop out of high school. By the way, I was still in high school. And so, I had to drop out of high school. That had become extremely difficult for me, being, having a kid, and now I'm pregnant again. And so, now, I don't have my high school diploma, and, my high school dropout, beauty school dropout, and
I hate how those words become identities.
Mm-hmm.
It's not you dropped out of high school. It's I am a dropout.
Yes.
And man, you are not an adjective. Like, you are. There are things that have happened to us. They are part of us, but they shouldn't identify us.
Yes. And then I had somebody tell me that me and my children would not ever amount to anything other than just another statistic and someone living off the government. And so that was really difficult, become a really difficult part of our story. And you know what? And that's why I do what I do, because we went through a lot during those first years that I had the children. our marriage was struggling because we did later marry. Our marriage was struggling. We went through bouts of no electricity, no water. I'd gone to food banks. I'd gone to, I used to sell plasma because I could sell plasma and make more money to help feed my kids. Even driving with Nevaeh the other day down through my community, I said, you see this Circle K back when Brent and Ashley were little and I didn't have money. I would stand outside that door, and they did this little coupon thing. And so when people would come out, I'd ask them for their coupons, and so that I could fill these little books up, because every full book you get $1 worth of food.
Yeah.
And that was how, we were just being very creative as to how we could feed our children and take care of things. My mom and dad, again, were great. I will just say this. My kids never had to worry about diapers. They never had to worry about formula or baby food, because my mom was a very big, proponent of, you made your bed, you'll lay in it. And but I am not going to have my grandkids suffer because of your choices. And so...
kids never deserve to suffer.
No. My mama always was, you know what? People may be against what you chose to do, but your children were never a mistake. They're never a sin. They're never, and her and my dad were really big on that. And, and I had kids, so, you have to, anyway. So, and then one day, everything come crashing down on me. We had a house. Things were kind of going okay. We were going as good as we could be going. And I just slipped into some uneasy emotions. And because of this stuff from my earlier childhood, I had suppressed it. And so as I had Ashley, and she was right at about a year old, and I had to take her to the doctor at General Hospital, and General Hospital was located in a different kind of the community, and it was a common practice that when you brought in a child for whatever reason, they automatically inspected them for signs of child sexual abuse. And I was not prepared for that. And so when he started to inspect her, was what they were calling it, I fell plumb apart. And it started me on a spiral. And because I could not believe that somebody was looking at her naked other than me and her dad. She was a baby, that she was mine to protect. And so I had, within just a couple of weeks, had found myself suicidal. And so because I just couldn't handle it, all this past trauma was flooding me down. And, I did have a job, and, and they were trying to be supportive, and I just couldn't cope. And so Bobby called my mom and said, hey, she's been crying. I can't get her to stop crying. You're going to have to come do something. And so my mom got me, and I told her, I said, I just want to die. I want to commit suicide. Here's how I want to do it. My family would be better off without me. I can't protect anybody. And so my mom and dad, that was a hard reality, because all of that trauma that they'd been protected from, that they didn't know about.
The bomb goes off.
It all just, it exploded. And so my mom's like, what can I do? And so she took me to Tennessee Christian Medical Center, and I spent 2 weeks there. And I'm always thankful that I did not act on my emotions at where I was in that state of mind, because I would have missed out on so much life of my children and my family. And so I started to begin to get the help that I needed. And so unfortunately, my marriage didn't survive, and I become a single mom. And that life also led into a life of a lot of struggles because I still didn't want to have anything to do with church, Christians, and anything like that, which is funny because I went to Tennessee Christian.
Yeah.
And I will say that was my first encounter with God.
At Tennessee Christian.
At Tennessee Christian, because one of the things they gave me was a Bible, and sometimes I skip out on a point, but right before I ended up in Tennessee Christian, I had gone to a church. I tried church, and I tried it for about 6 months. No, I'm getting ahead of myself. I went to Tennessee Christian. I did everything that I needed to do, and I was able to get released. But I had an encounter with Christ in that time, and so that sparked something in me. And so when I got out, a friend of mine invited me to church, and so I started on that path. But what happened is when I went into that church, the women distanced themselves from me. And so, and I typically got along better with men. Yeah. And so I gravitated toward the men, and the women pushed themselves away from me. So I'm basically experiencing firsthand, again, things that I heard my mama say. And I loved the Lord, and I was just, but it only lasted about 6 months. And because my not my parents, but some of my friends were like, oh, this church thing ain't working for you, and so I just pulled away. And I didn't want a part of it. The women were mean to me, and I had a weakness when it came to men. And so then I become a single mom, and we're going through this and trying to make ends meet, trying to survive. I had a lot of sin, a lot of stuff I was doing, but God was still calling on me, and I could feel Him calling on me. And but I was running. I was resisting it. I didn't want no part of it. The church was mean to me multiple times. I experienced it as a child. I heard it from my parents. I went to this small church. They, didn't want to have anything to do with me. And so I had another friend invite me to a divorce recovery. And so I went with him, and that seemed like, I could do this. It was a larger church. And so in Clarksville. And so I went there, and my kids and I started going to Sunday school, and I'll never forget this. I was standing in the Sunday school class, and they had us all in a circle holding hands, and we had been talking about the woman at the well, and about how terrible and bad she was, and how people didn't, she had to go by herself, and just the story of the woman at the well. And then, at that church, the bell rang. So we're all standing around in a circle. And everything they were describing in the circle about the woman at the well was me. Everything. Because of where I was in my relationship with men, the failures, all of that, the shame, that they were describing me. And then the class dismissed. So I didn't get to hear the rest of the story. Wow. And I didn't go back. Wow. I did not go back. And so, there goes another, right? That's
missed opportunity.
And so I was just so full of shame and guilt. And, I'm never going to amount to anything. I'm just damaged goods. And so so I started working at a company in Nashville. And I had some guys in that department, in a department next to me that were older, and they would just tell me all the time, Renee, I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you. Jesus loves you. And, I'm like, yeah, right. I'm just such a reject. He don't want anything to do with me. I'm too bad. I'm terrible. And so with that, they were doing this, and I was having terrible relationships. I was just, my relationship with men were so toxic and so unhealthy. And so, but I was trying so hard to fill a need that only God could fill. But I was seeking it elsewise, in drinking, in relationships with men. And it wasn't working. It just wasn't working. Yeah. And so, one night I was at my house, and this Bible that somebody had given me back from when I was in Tennessee Christian was in my bedroom. Who knew, right? Yeah. And I just remember sitting there on that couch, and it's like, God, my life is terrible. I'm a single mom. I feel like a failure. I'm in all these unhealthy relationships with married men because I felt like I could be in control of it. You know what I'm saying? It was safe for me, and I could control it. And I'm exhausted. Mm-hmm. I'm just tired. And it was like something just snapped, and my whole life changed instantaneously. My heart for the Lord just grew. And I remember I went back to work, and I went to Mr. Bob, who was one of the men that was like, Renee, I'm praying for you, and I told him what had happened, and I said, something's just different. And, Mike was my supervisor. He was my boss. And I'm like, because I used to be the center of all the jokes. I would be writing with the dirty jokes and all the coarse talking, now not around Mike, but, in the environment that I was in. And I'm like, Mike, I need you to put some glass walls around me. And he did. And I said, because I just can't handle all this talk anymore. Mike, I need a cordless phone because I need to be able to go over here to this other department where Mr. Bob was at so that I didn't have to. And Mike's like looking at me like, what is going on? And it was evident. And so then I was still struggling, right? I still had some struggles. And so then my niece needed a ride to church. Yeah. And so part of my past is, I always wanted to be the life of the party. So I always rode around with a cooler of beer in my truck. And because I was a party on wheels. And so I remember pulling up to the church to take her. It was on a Wednesday night at Oak Grove in Charlotte. And Jamie Allen was there doing an interview. I guess, I think that's what it was called, an interview, for the pastoral position there, he and Diane. And they invited me to come in, and, and the love that I felt from that church, and the women wrapped their arms around me, and it was something that I needed. And I don't know that other than Jamie, there might have been one or two other men, but those women just loved me and loved on me. And, and that's when, things started to change. And, and I prayed, because when I first come in, I was like, I hate men. I ended every relationship that I was in. And I asked God, I said, my heart's desire is I just want to be loved. And Mike was my boss. He's 21 years older than me. And he opened my eyes and my heart to Mike, and Mike's to me. And he did that. And within about 3 months, he was my boss for 4 years. I tell everybody I needed a raise. And so within about 3 months, we were married.
Oh, wow.
I mean, God and Jamie he's like, well, you come in here hating men. Now you're telling me you're getting married. Yeah, well, that's how it goes. Because my kids loved him. And I remember when I brought him to the house, Ashley looked at him, when are you going to marry my mama?
Oh,
and
no pressure.
and Mike's like, well, And so there we go, right? And so so God blessed me with Mike, and we've been married. We just celebrated 21 years because, people had ugly comments about that. But, yeah, I mean, well, I was 30 and he was 51 and, and that's kind of an odd. But, man, God knew what he was doing. Oh, he knew what he was doing. And so.
Yeah, but what did he have against Mike?
I tell Mike all the time, I was like, you know what? God was playing a cruel joke on you while he blessed me. And I have stretched that poor man beyond his capacity at times. And so, but, and God is just moving in our lives and we're doing great. And, I didn't have to work anymore. And so Mike's like, well, hey, you can come home and just, and I was like, ooh, I'm going to be Susie Homemaker. Well, that did not work for me. And so I went to work for Holland Employment under Pam Coons. Yeah. And Pam introduced me to the Help Center. And
is this Pam's fault?
Well, it was funny because the Help Center was right behind Holland Employment at the time on College Street. And so she's like, hey, you ought to go down there and see what they got. And so I just go down there and go shopping, and so I got introduced to that. And so never thought about working there. And so be it. A couple of years later, I'd applied for 3 different positions there. Yeah. Over about a year and got rejected for 2. Okay. And then I got hired in part-time, and that was in 2005. Okay. And so I quickly realized that all of my life stuff up to that point had prepared me for what God had me assigned to do at the Dickson County Help Center. Because
no school, no college,
a better
curriculum than the life that you lived.
Yep. And and to go back real quick, I did work for a company when I was at the when I got put into Tennessee Christian, and my employer, she invested in me. Her name is Susan Frensley, and I have not seen her in years, but I would just love to hug her neck because. She, when I called her and told her I was in Tennessee Christian for this, and she was the first person that said, Renee, several people within this company have been where you're at. And then, and that just opened a lot of doors.
I wish I could tell people, like, who has been down what roads. And, they're not my stories to tell. But, if you could do it, I would love to just have a Sunday where you put up on the screen, here's everybody in the church's problems. Now look at it. You're not alone.
Right. And Susan and the team there, they invested in me. They encouraged me to go back to high school. So I did adult high school and had my high school diploma. But I never did make it back to college except for that one stint where I worked for a company and I said something wrong. And I ended up 6 months in a class on how to talk. Because I still had a little hood in me. But anyway, that's another story.
Is that when your East Nashville
Yeah, that's when some of my East Nashville come out. But anyway, so I'm working here at the Help Center, and, women would come in, and it's like, well, you just don't understand. And I do understand. And I would start sharing my story. Okay. And it's like, but and so my thing is, it's like, I draw these 2 lines. Here's the day you're born, and here's the day you die. All this crap can happen to you before you're 18 or whatever age period. Yeah. But why in the world would you allow what happened then to dictate the way you're going to live the rest of your life?
And who cares if you walk in the doors at 78? Why would you not want your last years to be? Because how many times do you hear, well, I've been doing this so long, I can't. That's just who I am. That's just who I am is my least favorite phrase in English vocabulary.
Yes.
I don't care who you am.
Right, exactly. And, and that's, one of the things too, and I know I've kind of told a whole lot and really not said a whole lot, but, God took all of that and he put all my stuff. And he gave me a heart for women's ministry because I tell people all the time, I did not like women because they were so mean to me. So I didn't like women and I didn't like church and, I had issues. And so, but God took all that and gave me a heart for broken women. Yeah. And, and a lot of times they'll look at me like, you understand how I feel? Oh, yeah, because unfortunately, we are pretty judgy at times. And so people will look at me and they're like, you don't know what it's like.
Yeah.
No, here, let me share some of my story.
Yeah, I do.
And so,
Pull up a chair.
and it gives people hope, right? And so it's like, that's one of the things that I want to do is I want to honor God. I want to honor the legacy that my grandmother left. And I want to be a hope and an encouragement for women to know that, I don't say for men because God has called me to women's ministry, right? This is where my place is and my calling. And so the Help Center just opened up so many doors for me to breathe life into to people that are struggling. And that's, I know what it's like to go without electricity. I know what it's like to go from food bank to food bank. I know what it's like to do stupid stuff that, people might look at differently, but you do what you got to do to take care of your family. And
one thing I tell people is it's not stupid if it works.
Right.
Even if it's a little stupid.
Yeah, right. And, I get it. And, I want to go to Second Harvest one day and say, y'all need to let me be a guest speaker and tell my story about how, because people so often want to talk down about people who are struggling or who lie to get some kind of service. Because I remember in Nashville, I had 3 different mailing addresses so that I could go to 3 different food banks to get food to help feed my children. To survive. And so, you know what, it's, people do what you got to do in circumstances that most of us don't understand. But anyway, so, and I'm always thankful for what God has done for me and through me, because what seemed like, I had this terrible thing going on, He has really used it to honor and glorify Him, and that is my goal. I'm not perfect. I make all kinds of mistakes. I say stuff all the time that makes people mad. My face speaks more, gets me in more trouble.
You don't have a poker face, do you?
I don't. My facial expressions get me in way more trouble than my mouth could ever, and but you know what? I love God, and I just want to see His women made whole, and to and just help people understand. You know what I'm saying? That just because somebody is going through a difficult season doesn't make them a bad person. And so I go above and beyond to make women feel comfortable when they walk in a church. I make sure, to the best of my ability, that if a woman walks into the church, that we are surrounding her. I don't want a woman to feel like I did. I don't want, and then the other thing is, it took me a few years, but I did get to hear the rest of the story of the woman at the well.
Okay.
And, and it was like, oh, how awesome. So with that, whenever I teach class, I always make sure if I start out with something heavy, I make sure that the end is known before anybody walks out the door, because I don't want anybody to ever not hear the rest of the story and think that they're beyond.
Some good preaching advice I heard was preach like it's the only time you'll ever see them.
Mm-hmm.
Preach like they almost decided not to come. And preach like their life depends upon it.
Yes, absolutely.
And man, I love those 3 pieces just because we need people. Look, sometimes we need our toes stepped on. Sometimes we need some hard stuff. Sometimes we need to get confronted, but confrontation happens best in relationship.
Yeah.
And frankly, the pulpit is not relationship for most people in the room. So what most people need most often is encouragement, because encouragement gets you where you want to go.
Absolutely.
If you put a gun to my head and said, you've got to jump across the Grand Canyon, I would say shoot me, because it's going to kill me quicker.
Yeah.
But if you told me that I've got to run across the Grand Canyon to save my family, I would still die, but I would die trying.
Yes, absolutely.
People need encouragement. They need something to run towards, not from.
Absolutely. And, and one of the things that, when people share their stories, we tend to spend so much time on all the ugly or the bad. And so I don't want to end this without saying, how good and how amazing God is and how he has been. He has restored the years that the locust has stolen.
I've read that somewhere.
And so my son, I tell my kids all the time that they're my testimony. Mm-hmm. My son was the first kid in our family line to graduate college.
How cool.
And he did that right here in Dickson County. And Ashley, so Brent is doing well. He and his wife and their little girl, Olivia, they have about 100-acre farm in Cumberland Furnace, and they're living their best life. I couldn't be more proud of them. My Ashley, the one that almost chose, got her degree as a social worker, and she is married to the love of her life. And we have jokes about that because they are building a home on about 65 acres, and they have 5 kids. And they really like each other. She'll kill me for that statement. And, I'm going to have to say this, baby number 5, was a failed vasectomy. Oh, no. Just want to throw that into any men, folks.
Like you shut your mouth.
I'm just saying. But her babies, and she has a heart. She has a heart as big as everything. And so one of their dreams for their farm is to eventually have tiny homes that so that they can minister to single pregnant women or single pregnant teenagers, to help them in that choice for life and to give them a good start. And so that's what her dream is. And so I'm super, super, super proud of her. And I tell people all the time that, I was spoken down to with my children, but both of my kids from that season, God has just... They never were part of statistics. We rose above our circumstances, but
worthless things in the world.
A white picket fence and a pregnant teenager.
Yeah, I think God found some worth in. I don't know what he thinks about the picket fence, but I think he saw some worth in the teenager.
Right. And, and I always was like, well, what's that supposed to mean? Well, what he meant by that is that they always require the upkeep of someone else. And,
So look what this family is giving back to the world.
Exactly. And, in God's redemption, again, he gave me a husband that I could not ask for more love and to be loved in a way that I'm loved. And one of the things that Mike and I had talked about was it would be great if we could have shared a child together.
Yeah.
And, but because of some health problems that I had, that was not going to happen. And, but God, right? Ashley was 20 and, God brought the most beautiful little girl into our lives when she was 8 months old. And, I couldn't imagine, I'm like, God, what have I ever done that you would give me another life to be responsible for? I mean, I've messed up, I've done all this and, but he trusted Mike and I with this beautiful blessing, as well as her birth parents. Her birth parents trusted us with her and the sacrifice that they made. Yeah. To be a part of our story, I will be forever grateful for. But she's 13 and sassy, and and she keeps us on our toes.
Constant danger that she's 13 and sassy.
And so, and then I've got another beautiful blessing with us, and that's my little niece Viola, and she's 13, 14 years old. Depends on when this is aired, but and it's like, wow, God, we must be doing something right that you would entrust these beautiful souls with us. And so, not only does he trust us with these beautiful blessings, but then he puts me in a position in this community where I get to share my story and my love for those that are hurting to make a difference. We don't always do it right. We're constantly improving, but you know what? I am so blessed and honored to be a part of the Dickson County Help Center, to serve in the role as the executive director. And, I just want us to always be a beacon of light, to be able to help people.
People don't realize how much y'all do. Thrift store, food giveaways, rent, electricity, medication, disaster relief. I mean, just give your spiel. Okay?
You know what? You did a great job, but you know what? We are our county's largest food bank, and we help in helping people during their times of needs. We also are an ear and a prayer. I mean, we've had some of our clients that just go through the roughest parts of their life, and they'll come to us and just, I've learned to plan funerals for people that I'm not because somebody needed help. And so, we just get to be a part of people's lives, and just a beacon of light and for the Lord. And that is so awesome and amazing to be a part of that. And, we couldn't do what we do without the support of the others. And, people tell you all the time, people support people. That's why I'm so open about sharing my story, and that, and I want to encourage people that regardless of where you're at, you don't have to stay there. Let's not cast blame on anybody else. Look at where we're at. Bad things happen to good people, but let's move forward.
Yeah.
And, and that's like, even with some of the people, God's redemption, I'm telling you what, when the Lord talks about forgiveness, he knows what he's doing. And, there are people that were in my past that were a part of my abuse, that God has given me the grace and the mercy to forgiveness.
Wow.
And although what was done was not good, it was not right, I can still be in fellowship with some, and and that is hard for many people.
That is miraculous.
And so, but you know what? God has given me that ability to be able to do that. And so I walk in that and I share that, just because you forgive somebody doesn't mean that you're okay with what they've done.
No.
But
forgiveness is not that thing is okay. It was that thing was not okay, but you and I can be okay.
Yes. And then, one of the things that I love to share with women is just because something bad like that happens, it was wrong. It should never, ever, ever, ever happen. But don't live in that. Don't let your whole life just fade away.
Your identity be someone's abuse.
Yes, yeah, and live the best life, because again, we were born, we die. Don't let what happens in this season dictate the way you're going to live the rest of your life. And if that's the one thing that I can teach people, is that.
We can help people see identity in Christ.
Yes.
And the obvious versions of addiction and abuse and dropout, the names are hard enough, but there's a more insidious version, I think, that I think more of our listeners are going to relate to. I tend to identify with my job. You tend to identify with yours.
Yes.
And it is really easy for us to identify as athlete or worker or minister or successful business, and that's our identity.
Yes.
And you see it, when somebody who has their identity even as mom, sometimes is toxic.
Yes.
Because what happens when the kids leave the house? The fastest growing segment of divorce in the United States, empty nesters.
I could absolutely see that.
Because my identity was in dad, not we didn't have a marriage. I was a parent. And I just say all that to say, this whole conversation, I think it's one we really need to hear. Our identity in Christ, our identity as a balanced human being, our identity not just in our utility to other people. Mm-hmm. You're going to have a really hard time when you get old if your utility to other people is the only thing you identify with. When you break down and you require help and you can't be a helper anymore, if that's the only thing you identified with, you're in for a tough time.
Absolutely. And, and Mike and I, God has given us a ministry of marriage. I like to facilitate marriage classes. And because I will tell people, the greatest thing that you can do for your children is to love your spouse more than you love your children. Oh, women have a hard time with that. And I will tell them, you know what, as long as there's no abuse going on, right? There's always those fine lines.
There's exceptions.
Yes. But if you're loving your spouse more than you love your children are going to reap the benefits of that in the most amazing way. They're going to have a loving, stable home. And, Mike and I were able to exhibit that to our children and now to our littles. Well, they're not littles, they're teenagers, bless us. And so, but they get to see what it's like to live in a healthy, loving environment. And of course, my parents, great example right there as well. But
Todd gave me another version of it in the jail ministry. He told the guys, he said, you need to love your parole officer more than you love your family. He says, if you don't prioritize that guy, you're going to be back here away from your family again.
Oh.
And he said it's a good way to think of it. You've got to do whatever you've got to do. Pay your fees, make your visits, have clean tests. You got to make that guy happy.
Yes.
Don't think that you made him happy by making your family happy. He goes, I know this sounds backwards, but I think that sounds just as backwards to a lot of people as put God first. Well, what about my family? What about my kids? And if you put him first, you're going to treat them really well.
Absolutely.
It's going to work.
Absolutely.
But in putting your kids first, you destroy them and you.
You do, absolutely, and your marriage will suffer from it. And so, I believe in investing in people. I thank people all the time for investing in me because of the investment that they've put into me has made me who I am today.
Yeah.
And so my goal is to invest in people. So many times people want to throw people away. They want to say ugly, cruel things.
It's easy, man, because somebody hurts you, you're like, I'm done.
Yes, and it's like, don't do that. Invest in them. Yeah. People make mistakes. Invest in them. I love working with the work crew at the Dickson County Sheriff's Department.
They are the best.
They are. And, and I tell them all the time, I was one mistake away from where you at. I was a thief, but I didn't get caught. Yeah. I made really bad decisions. I didn't get caught. So that's the difference between us. They got caught. I didn't. And then I tell them, and then I found God, and I didn't want to do that anymore. Yeah. And so, it's just being a hope, but invest in people, see the good that they have in them, and know that God can change anybody's heart, and don't throw people away. Don't throw them away.
And again, what's so tough? Boundaries exist for a reason, healthy boundaries. But my favorite definition of boundaries are the distance where I can love you and me at the same time.
Oh, yes, cool? That is.
Because it's not I'm throwing you away. It's this is the way that we can do this and succeed.
Yes, absolutely.
Even boundaries are done right are an investment in people.
Absolutely.
This has been fun.
It has been. I hope I haven't gone over too far.
I told you before, it's like this is not like cell phone plans in like 2002. You don't pay by the minute. Yeah. You don't have to wait till after 9 or, So this has been cool. But is there anything else you want to share today?
No, other than I appreciate you giving me this opportunity and thank you for what you're doing in this community because, God has used you to help restore faith in a lot of different people and into churches. And I appreciate you. I appreciate your boldness. And I know you're not asking for a pat on the back, but I know we cut it up and tease you a lot.
For abuse, it's my love
language. But I appreciate what you're doing through these podcasts and allowing people an opportunity to share their stories and an opportunity for us to listen because we do find hope in other people's story, and
it's
yes,
powerful.
It is
so powerful. And this has been one of the more fun ministry experiments. Liz Coons talked me into starting this, and we'll try it, and we'll try at least 10, and then I bet we can get to 50. And now the goal is to get to 100, and maybe we get to 100 and I quit. Who knows? Maybe we do something else. But we're not going to run out of stories. There's 55,000 people in this county. We got enough stories to keep us busy for a while.
Absolutely.
And sometimes the best stories are the ones you never... I didn't know most of your story today. And how long... We've known each other since... I think we met in 2006 or 7.
Yes.
So, there's just a lot of work left to be done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And God is using us, isn't He?
Yeah, man. He uses jawbones of donkeys all the time, but here we are.
Yeah, here we are.
All right, friends, I think that's where we got to call it. I hope you have a good day. Thanks for listening. Hey, you've got a lot of things you could be listening to. You could be listening to some crackpot on the radio tell you why his politics are right, or some has-been athlete telling you how your sports team could have lost. But you took the time today to listen to this, to hear what God's up to. And I just appreciate that you'd give us a little bit of your time. I appreciate that you would look for God's stories, because I think when you look for God's stories, you find them. That's what I believe, at least. Okay, until next time, can't wait to find out what God does in your story. It's going to be cool.
Thanks for listening to Rough Drafts. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. While you are at it, help us spread the word by leaving a rating and review. Until next time, let's keep looking for how God writes His love into our stories.